The instructions say to check the aircraft's surface with a Geiger counter, to collect soil samples from the depression left in the ground, and if the object vanished before anyone could get close enough, secure a signed statement from every witness, cross-reference their names against FBI records, and note, carefully, whether the observer seemed fatigued at the time of the sighting. This is not a science fiction script. This is not a conspiracy blog. This is an official United States government document, stamped restricted, signed by a Major General, distributed simultaneously to the CIA, the State Department, the Chief of Naval Intelligence, and the Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And here is the question that has been sitting in the back of my mind since I first opened this file. If the government truly believed these were nothing more than weather balloons and misidentified aircraft, why did they need a Geiger counter? But hold on, because there is a detail buried near the end of this document, in the section on radar sightings, that changes the entire complexion of everything that came before it. We will get there, but first, we need to understand what this file actually is and why it exists at all. The document in front of us is archived under FBI case file number 62HQ83894, serial 164. It is a 137-page file held at FBI headquarters, stamped with the words "Do Not Destroy." On its cover, it carries the markings of the FBI Central Records Center. Inside, the core document is a 7-page Air Force memorandum, reproduced numerous times across those 137 pages, the repetition itself suggesting this was circulated extensively, copied for multiple recipients, filed, cross-filed, and preserved with the kind of bureaucratic seriousness you reserve for things that genuinely worry you. The memorandum is dated February 15, 1949. Its title is Air Intelligence Requirements Memorandum No. 4. Its subject, Unconventional Aircraft. That phrase, unconventional aircraft, is doing a great deal of work in a very small space. The document itself immediately clarifies what it means, because right there in the opening paragraph, in the cold, dry language of a military memo, it spells it out. The purpose of this document is, and I am reading directly from the text, to collect information pertaining to sightings of unconventional aircraft and unidentified flying objects, including the so-called flying discs. Flying discs. In 1949, in an official, restricted, interagency U.S. government document. This is actually written in an official document, not the tabloids, not a radio broadcast, a memo signed by a Major General and distributed across the entire United States military and intelligence apparatus. That Major General is C.P. Cabell, Charles Pear Cabell, at this moment the Director of Intelligence for the Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff, Operations, Headquarters United States Air Force. His signature appears at the close of the memorandum. The man who signed this document went on to become Deputy Director of the CIA. That is the level of authority behind these instructions. And what instructions they are. The memo supersedes two earlier documents on the same subject, a Department of the Army collection memorandum from January 1948 and a subsequent letter from March of that year, which tells us this was not a sudden, panicked reaction to a wave of sightings. By early 1949, the military had already been collecting reports for at least a year and was now formalizing, refining, and expanding the process. Memorandum number 4 implies there were at least 3 memoranda before it. This bureaucracy of the unknown had been growing in the dark for some time. Hold on here, because this detail gets even stranger when combined with what we are about to see, the sheer scope and precision of the reporting system they built. The document establishes a chain of command for reporting. Any sighting had to be transmitted electrically, meaning by cable or teletype, with maximum urgency, to the Commanding General of Air Materiel Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. The specific attention line reads MCIAX03. That is the code for the Intelligence Collection Unit at Wright-Patterson. At the same time, a copy went to the Director of Intelligence at Headquarters Air Force in Washington. The commanding general at Wright-Patterson was explicitly authorized to reach out directly to air commands around the world in pursuit of information on this subject. This is a global surveillance network for flying discs, coordinated from Wright-Patterson, copied to Washington. And the distribution list at the bottom of this memorandum tells you exactly who else needed to know. Commanding generals of all major air commands, both domestic and overseas, all United States air attachés, which means every American military intelligence officer embedded in every foreign embassy, the Director of Central Intelligence, the Special Assistant for Research and Intelligence at the Department of State, the Director of Intelligence for the Army, the Chief of Naval Intelligence, the Commandant of the United States Coast Guard Intelligence Division, and the Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Can you believe this? Every major intelligence and military agency in the United States government was formally looped into a system designed to track and analyze unidentified flying objects. And not just notified, they were required to forward their own reports directly to Wright-Patterson. But the true weight of this document is not in the chain of command. It is in Part 2, the requirements section, the checklist of exactly what investigators were expected to observe, record, and collect when they encountered one of these things. It looks like a normal report checklist at first: date of sighting, time, location, number of objects. Standard enough. But then it gets detailed in ways that reveal exactly how seriously this was being taken and how genuinely strange these encounters must have been. The document asks investigators to record the apparent construction of the object, of what material or substance it appeared to be made. It asks for the object's shape, with a note to sketch it if possible. It asks for color, about size, about how the object compared in apparent scale to known objects in the observer's view. Then it moves to what the document calls tactics or maneuvers. The language here is striking. The memo lists the following possibilities without judgment, as if they are all equally plausible: vertical ascent or descent, horizontal flight, oscillating, fluttering, evasive, aggressive, or erratic movement. Aggressive. The word aggressive appears in an official government checklist for documenting the behavior of unidentified flying objects. That is not the language of a program expecting to find weather balloons. The exhaust section asks investigators to note the color of any smoke trail, its length and width, whether it has any odor, its rate of evaporation, and whether the trail varies in relation to sound, specifically noting what they called spurts. There is a category for the effect on clouds. Did the object open a path through the clouds? Did it force cloud or mist formation? Was it reflected on a cloud surface? Did it show through the cloud? It asks about lights, whether they were reflected or luminous, whether they blinked on and off in relation to the object's speed. It asks about propulsion, propeller, jet, rotor, or something the document calls aerodynamic vanes, producing what it labels the Katz-Meyer effect. It asks about control surfaces, fins, stabilizers, air ducts, and duct openings. It asks about the sound. Was it a continuous whine or buzz, a roar, a whistle, a whoosh? Was it intermittent? And the section on disappearance. The document lists 3 options for how these objects ended an encounter. They exploded, with a subcategory for the possibility of fragments and other physical evidence. They faded from view, or they simply disappeared behind an obstacle. What I am about to show you now is the section that explains why investigators were being asked to bring Geiger counters to these scenes. Under the general instructions, the broad investigative guidelines, the document states that if an object contacted the Earth, investigators should obtain soil samples from within and without the depression or spot where the object landed and then presumably departed. The phrase presumably departed is doing something remarkable there. It is acknowledging that whatever this thing was, it could land and it could leave, and when it left a mark in the ground. And then comes the line that stops you cold. If the object came sufficiently near other aircraft or known objects, investigators are instructed to check surfaces with Geiger counters for possible radioactivity. Make comparisons with other unaffected aircraft. The United States Air Force, in a February 1949 restricted memorandum distributed to every major intelligence agency in the country, was instructing field investigators to check for radiation contamination on aircraft that had come close to unidentified flying objects. They were not asking this because they thought the answer would be nothing. You do not build a Geiger counter protocol into a routine reporting system unless you have a reason to expect that the readings might not be zero. The section on observer reliability goes somewhere equally unexpected. Investigators were required to assess the credibility of anyone who reported a sighting. That assessment included cross-referencing the observer's name against FBI records. The document lists the sources for reliability checks: neighbors, the police department, the observer's employer, and right there in third position, FBI's own files. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's own files were to be. They were consulted to evaluate whether a person who had seen something in the sky was trustworthy enough for their account to matter. This was not casual. This was systematic. Every person who came forward with a sighting could have their background quietly investigated by an interrogator. The memo actually uses that word, interrogator, who was then required to record comments regarding the intelligence and character of the person interrogated. And then there is the radar section. The document's instructions for radar-based sightings contain a detail that is both technically specific and genuinely unsettling. Investigators observing a radar target were told to note particularly any separation of a distant target into several targets as approach, track all if possible. Something that appeared on radar as a single return at distance was splitting into multiple returns as it got closer. The document treats this as a known enough phenomenon that it merits a specific protocol. They had seen it before, enough times to put it in the training manual. Beyond the radar instructions, ground observers were asked whether there were any radio antennae to be observed on the object, any projections or extensions that might presumably be construed as such. So investigators were being asked to look for communication equipment on unidentified flying objects. The question is embedded so matter-of-factly in the checklist that it almost passes without notice. But read it again. The Air Force wanted to know if these things had antennae. This entire apparatus, the global reporting chain, the Geiger counters, the soil samples, the FBI background checks, the radar tracking protocols, the antenna question, was signed, formalized, and distributed in February 1949. The Korean War had not yet started. The Cold War was just crystallizing. The Soviet Union had tested its first atomic bomb. And in that context, the United States military was pouring resources into tracking objects that could fly erratically, fade from view, split on radar, leave depressions in the ground, possibly contaminate nearby aircraft with radiation, and disappear. The cover of this FBI file reads, "Do not destroy." That instruction has been followed. The file exists. The memorandum exists. The signature of Major General C.P. Cabell exists. The Geiger counter protocol exists. The instruction to check FBI records on witnesses exists. The soil sample directive exists. After all these pages, only one question remains. What exactly were they finding?